Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about angiosperms, which are going to be flowering plants. So here we go. Alright, angiosperms, basically there's so many species, more than any other types of plants combined, and they live pretty much everywhere from really cold to desert type habitats. They live very near fresh water, just really all over the place. And the seeds in angiosperms develop from an ovule within an ovary, and the ovary is going to become the fruit, and that's going to make these seeds. Okay, so angiosperms are basically just flowering plants, or plants that produce fruit that we can eat, some of which we can eat anyway. Do not worry about monocots and eudicots. You do not have to know that at all. That's not going to be tested, so don't worry about that. Now, parts of the flower, basically there's a receptacle, which is going to be the tip of the stalk that bears flowers. You're going to have the sepals that are going to these leaves that protect the bud. And the sepal is also called a calyx. You can have petals or corolla. They can be the really pretty ones that make up part of the flower. You have stamens, which are the male part of the plant. And you can have the anther, which is responsible for pollen production. And then the female reproductive structures are the carpels. You have the stigma, which is where the pollen is received. You have the style, and then you have the ovary. And then ovule production, you need to know that fertilization happens in the ovule. Okay, so these parts on this slide are really the reproductive structures of the plants. Okay, the receptacles, the sepals, petals, stamens, and carpels, and all their little parts. Okay, just keep that in mind. Now, here's just a picture. On the left here with the anther and the filament and the stamens, you have the male part of the plant. And then on the right side with the stigma, style, ovary, ovule, that's the female portion of the flower. Remember, in the ovule, that's where fertilization occurs. And then you have petals or corolla that make the flower really pretty. And then you have sepals or calyx, which make up really the bottom leaves that are right next to the petals themselves. So they offer a lot of structure and support for the actual flower part of the plant. Now, just to show you some pictures, flowers have lots and lots of diversity due to basically geneticists breeding different flowers and getting different colors over the years. And so we have many, many different types of flowering plants, lots and lots of variety and lots of diversity too. Now, the life cycle of flowering plants, basically the sexual reproduction in a plant that has flowers is dependent on the flower itself, because it produces the seeds and the pollen. And pollination can happen through the wind, or it can also happen through animals that carry the pollen either on their fur or on their wings. Basically, you can have flies, butterflies, moths, even like dogs and people. We carry pollen around in our hair, on our clothes. Okay, so pollination can happen really through animals or through the wind, and many flowers are actually adapted to attract very specific pollinators. So if you see flowers that just seem to have bees be attracted to them, if you see other flowering plants that tend to have wasps or tend to have hummingbirds, the reason is just because many flowers have pollen that certain insects or certain birds really like. Okay. Now, the fruit, some of which we're able to eat, that's the final product of a flower, and that helps have seed dispersal. Okay. Now, the life cycle of a flowering plant. Okay, it's a little bit complicated, but I know we can handle it. Basically, you've got the stamen. And the stamen, of course, is the male part of the plant. And then you've got the carpel there, and the carpel is going to have the ovary at the base of the carpel that's got one or more ovules. Remember, that's where fertilization takes place. Okay. And then you've got microsporangia, and so you've got pollen sacs of the anther, which are microsporangia. Okay. So you've got microspores being made, and these microspores are going to undergo mitosis, so they're going to divide themselves, and they're going to become these pollen grains. They're really mature, and they've got two cells. Okay. And the pollen sacs are going to open, and the grains are going to be basically blown around in the wind or through carried by animals, and that's going to be pollination. Now, these mature male gametophytes, basically, these pollen grains are going to land on the carpel, okay, and germinate and produce the pollen tube, okay, which is going to grow until it reaches an ovule in the ovary. Okay. And a fully germinated pollen grain is actually the mature male gametophyte. Okay. Now, megasporangium, this or the female kind of part of the plant, basically you got the ovule and an ovary, and you're going to end up having megaspores. These megaspores will actually undergo meiosis there, and so you'll have the inside of the ovule in an ovary. The megaspores are going to disintegrate, and then you're going to have one that's left that becomes a female gametophyte. Now, with a mature female gametophyte, you're going to have haploid nuclei that have a lot of cytoplasm around them. Okay. And then you're going to end up having fertilization or double fertilization. Okay. So you're going to have the pollen tube that discharges the sperm, and then you're going to have endosperm nucleus that are actually going to be food for the developing plant. Okay, so you end up getting a zygote, and then you end up having food for the plant. So you'll go through fertilization, and you end up with seeds. Seeds that eventually are going to help make fruit. Okay, the seed's going to germinate, okay, and make a sporophyte that's mature of a flowering plant, and basically that will help, and the tree will grow, and that's the flowering life cycle. Don't worry too much about this. It is kind of complicated. You might have a couple of questions about it, but you can always refer back to your PowerPoint if you need to. Now, here's some fruits that you're probably familiar with. Some of these have kernels. Okay, believe it or not, tomatoes are a fruit. They are. And you've got basically seeds there, and peas have seeds in pods. You have dandelion fruits that are carried by the wind. The kernels on corn are actually considered to be fruit. Okay. And then we have strawberries, fruits that we all know about, apples and such. All right, now genetic engineering of plants. This is kind of a complicated topic, I think. Basically, genetic engineers or botanists have been crossing plants and different varieties of plants for years to help make plants that have desirable traits. And basically in plants it's really easy to alter their genes and make plants that have these desirable traits, such as being able to be more drought resistant or wind resistant, to be able to withstand having less water, things like that. Okay. And plants that have a foreign gene, they're called transgenic or genetically modified plants. And you probably see that a lot, in the grocery store where it's non-GMO kind of food products. That just means that the plants that make up those foods don't have foreign genes in them. Now, basically, you have a lot of agricultural plants that we need to be able to eat, like corn, soybean, potato plants. They've been engineered to be resistant to either pests or also to herbicides. Okay, and so ongoing research is helping these botanists and genetic engineers be able to make, hopefully, more plants that are cold tolerant or drought resistant or blight resistant, like resistant to mildew and mold, things like that, or also salt tolerance too, so it'd be easier to grow plants near a body of salt water like an ocean or something like that. Okay, so we have these crops that have become herbicide resistant, salt tolerant. You can go down the list here, disease protected, and it helps them have a better shelf life when they're in the grocery store, and it also helps farmers be able to have bigger crops and basically hardier plants. Okay, and that's it.